Jak zwykle, jak zwykle zaczynamy od modlitw otwierających.
Chelo seba chewe namdara ji kume chenpa dendir sowande chambe lo ji ni ji jo tang jawa meba engi jo nambra da dongne gyo dan je la da gyo shi me da nge bra sendir sowande Nyemo nyelo geji me don shi ka de sha ya ni bu chele chi kewe ngazu sambo me don we shi ni pen ze gandre so an so so ra de na nyam ja ne jang ye so so ra je be shi ra ki je ro je zo jo bra me je ba nge de tham bra je de so chen bro cha la je shi je je lo me lo da ba nam je san je ra ne ge la jo ve lo je ge ve de nyo so ngo ra je de so te dra yen de je le ge gan do yen de yen de je be cha shi je be lu se de de ba ga ma ba ye gong ba zong ji xiu我上界觉当所业上那么了成就帮助到你耶稣，大概是业一别是那么严重了本上业如不了修上业觉当所业上那么成就帮助到你耶稣。大概是年一别是那也着了本，上也着不了修，上也知道所也着那么，上学报道当的有数。大概是年一别是那么也着了本，上也着不了修，上在往南去见下吧。解说也让对些社会，给我就是那个介绍把他们接当成熟节目，所些必须就是面多，人少为那些年的眼吧，上街现在没得不爱。如果能到新来绝不拉手，身边能也上班，落叶接着接到，其中的梦的把一切给公路公路说。好了，说，他唱的声音多啊。
You can all hear me, right?
대리 대비적인 점에게 녀마저마 단디 이제 하야게다 루드니 로몬도 메게나다 도와 군이라 계속 뭐 합작에도 나게 쳐야도 챔비스 세계를 내고 기지신호 중앙선 배서 이 시기에도 딩담매도 투쟁者라마를 차게 증검사를 민주당에서 미연적으로 주말 좋은데 정부진 대부대서가 요새라마 유버리 잘안돼 시작하라 결국엔 우리 예제배도 주제는 뭐 예외대 먹으면서 그 이유를 못 잘하자 번에도 지정하는 거죠. 아마 가마바 영국 인존의 시집에 이담는 좀 틀려고 이제 제대로 언제 쉬어 비진 전화라. 내주지 그 밴드는 다음에 도시 경험을 반대자라 말은 뭐제 나가 지으로 배면 되죠라. 그런 집에 거는 지존데 구성도 영으로 자도서 시작하라. 시제주는 남자 동맥에서는 오늘은 임보다 대주제라 남이고 미규도 제샤올라 샤즈로 나서 다 된대. 남들에게 선물이야. 안에 자식의 참주시와 잡직도
Today, I would like to first begin by wishing you all a nice welcome. And today, among the verses of the autobiographical verses of Mikyo Dorje, yesterday we were speaking about the seventh good deed, how he practiced the path of the lesser individual. So I will continue speaking about that one. And I will also speak about the eighth good deed, how he practiced the path of a middling individual. Now, the root text for the seventh good deed, how he practiced the path of the lesser individual, is, if I have to remind you of it,
나 가다 싶은 신기.
as I said yesterday, there are two main sections. Since the first of these is there are two main sections. We've already finished the first, and so now we are on this second of these, which is how he practiced the paths of the three types of individuals. And so this has three parts in terms of the three different types of individuals. And so this one discusses how he practiced the path of the lesser type of individual. And the verse reads, "Once I knew that all suffering that occurs is the result of my own wrongs, I could not complete in full unvirtuous acts of preparation, deed, and aftermath. I have not completed an unvirtuous act in this life. I think of this as one of my good deeds." And so I don't need to go through each word of the text. Now, I spoke about the meaning of it yesterday, and so to say a bit more about it again today.
대야, 경미기도지 고랑기 제베기 미기도지 남타라 라베 치사죠.
There's a text by Mikyo Dorje that entitled "Instructions on Training in the Liberation Story of Mikyo Dorje." And when I read it later, it seemed to me that I thought that it was probably a meaning commentary on the autobiographical versus good deeds. It's not an explication of the text, but it is an explanation of the meaning. Now, in the sixth good deed, Mikyo Dorje spoke about going for refuge to the three jewels. And so other than the three jewels who teach the path of giving up misdeeds and practicing virtue, no other sources of refuge can teach that path. And the reason they cannot see it, they cannot do it. The other sources of refuge are unable to actually see what are the critical points of what we should do and what we should not do. And the reason for this is that they have been wandering in samsara from beginningless time. So they are unable to know what causes lead to pleasure and what causes lead to suffering. And because they don't know this, they wander in samsara, right? The perfect Buddha knows what we should do and what we should not do as it is. And we've been taking birth in samsara from beginningless time. Now, the actual nature, ultimately, it is free of birth arising, birth staying, and perishing, but we don't know that. And so we have a lot of misconceptions, a lot of projections or denials about that nature. We have so many different thoughts, and for this reason, we have to wander in the three realms of samsara. And as long as we are wandering in samsara, we sentient beings, sometimes we've been one woman being's parent, and sometimes their child. And so sometimes they have been our parent, sometimes they've been our child, and so forth. And so there have been innumerable times that we have been able to, we've had a connection so many times in this way. Now, we don't need to think about this in terms of of harming each other, but if we think about it on the positive side, there have been many situations when we have benefited each other and when we've had really very great connections with each other. And if we think about it in terms of they have helped them, then if we would instead harm them, then the fully ripened result of that is that we experience terrible suffering. And then there are also the compatible results of experience from harming them that would arise from that. If we can think about it, for example, in terms of this experience in this lifetime, if you are not feeling well and you have to spend a day in bed, and you're unable to sleep, and you're unable to sleep all night, then that's very difficult, isn't it? And so we haven't recognized how people have helped or harmed us throughout beginningless samsara. And so we inflict harm upon them. And because of that, we then experience harm as a result. And that's just how karma occurs, or how it occurs. And we have done many things that the things that will cause suffering in the future. And if we actually think about it in terms of their actual nature, we would never dare to do such actions ourselves. And we should make sure that this thought that we'd never dare to do anything to harm another sentient being does not decrease over our entire lifetime. And we should also do whatever we can to make sure that such thoughts of harming other beings do not occur. And so this is what it says in Mikyo Dorje's instructions on the liberation story of Mikyo Dorje. But actually, until what has a minute, it's when we think about karma and the results help or harm ourselves and others, there's no need to discuss people who have not entered the Buddha's teachings, who do not understand Buddhism. But most people say that they've entered the Buddhist teachings. They have eliminated through study and misunderstandings what we should have done and would have induted. So we say that we're applying the attitudes of the mindfulness and awareness, or that we may be known as learned, venerable, or good. But most people like that, when they come to an actual, when they're trying to help other, trying to give up harming others and to bring benefit to others, when some problem happens, when impediment comes, they say it's not my fault. I have no choice but to do that. I didn't have a choice. I didn't have any. I didn't have any control. And in fact, I had no choice, and it was all because of the place, and because of time, and because that individual named such and such. And so they place the blame on the place and the time and other people. And so they forget about the needs of the next and future lifetimes. And for the sake of some minor pleasure in this life, they do all sorts of unvirtuous actions. And an example of this is like, it's like we put a piece of bait on a piece of meat as a bait on a fish hook, right? And we put that in the then we put that in the water. Then the fish swim around, and when they bite it, and then they're caught on the hook, and you can catch them, right? Likewise, for some sort of minor, puny sensory pleasure, we'll give up any consideration of our own bodies and lives and livelihoods. And so this happens to many people in our actual lives, right? However, but the way Mika Dorjit was is that it was his character, the way you can say that the way he acted. Is that even if it would mean gaining the pleasures of the gods in this lifetime, and gathering the happiness of the gods in this time, he wouldn't do anything contradictory to the teachings. And likewise, even if the suffering like the lower realms were to cure in this lifetime, he wouldn't do anything contradictory to the teachings to prevent that either. For example, if you have some delicious food, but you know that there's poison in it, if you know that it's poison, and know that if you're going to eat it, die if you eat it, then any sane person, like an ordinary person, someone who's not insane, basically, any sane person, so any sane person knows that no matter how hungry or number thirsty they are, if their hunger and thirst blazed like fire, they wouldn't eat that poisoned food. Likewise, no matter what difficulties we encounter from ourselves and others, it is not right to give up on the true Dharma. And so Mika Dorje was very assiduous and careful about giving up misdeeds and accomplishing virtue. He just didn't do any old thing at all. And so for that reason, some people who had like biased attachment to the Karmapa would say, and so His Holiness, and now they're speaking about Mika Dorje, of course, His Holiness is so precise and careful about cause and effect. So he must be doing this for other people's sake, because if he did that, it would be okay. But otherwise, how would he do it? You're a Nirmanakaya Buddha, aren't you? They would say to him. So many people said this to Mika Dorje. And what Mika Dorje would say to them in reply was, I said, I, Mika Dorje, and don't have any confidence at all that I am a Nirmanakaya of a Buddha. I don't have any confidence or any courage that I am a Buddha. For me to be given the title of Karmapa in this lifetime is not because I'm good at things or because I have the qualities of abandonment and realization. It is because the blessing of the activities of all the karmapas and the Buddhas. For example, a monk or a nun might be given the name Sangye, which means Buddha. So you call them Sangye or Buddha. And if you say that that's the activity or the blessing of the Buddhas, that's fine. You can say that. But just calling someone by the name Sangye or Buddha doesn't mean that they become a Buddha. And because they don't become a Buddha, it's certain they don't have to. It's not that they no longer need to take care about karma and results. It's just the same. So as long as I, Mikyo Dorje, am in these present aggregates of full ripening, as long as I'm stricken by birth, aging, sickness, and death, and so you can see this, but you say that I don't need to worry about karma, cause, and effect, and don't need to protect myself against that. But it's not like that, is it? If that were true, then what better news could there be than that? And so that is what he said to others, and he also practiced in that way. He practiced as and he preached. And so how is it that he actually taught, and how is it that he practiced? To give an example of this, Mikyo Dorje himself said, so in later times, I'm not going to read this exactly, I'm not going to read this literally, it's in later times, the Sakya and the Jigpan, Kadampa, the Mahamudra lineage, the Gelugpas and others, would teach the Dharma in slightly different ways. And because of this, different individuals, people would think, and so we different individuals, because you're thinking about different individuals in different schools who then start getting sectarian. And if we get sectarian, then we'll give up our all three vows of the individual liberation, the bodhisattva vows and tantric vows. So how is that? It's because all the monks will then go off to battle. Not only when they do that, they'll also go to destroy the representations of the three jewels. They'll also take each other, the monastics will take each other's lives. And they would also take away all of the support, all of the patrons and so forth who support it. And so they do all there's such incredibly reprehensible misdeeds and bad actions. And doing this completely destroys the Buddha's teachings and the community of the Sangha. And and what is the basis of this comes down to, this basis of the destruction of the teachings and the Sangha? It comes when we are getting really sectarianism about Dharma and individuals, when we get sectarian about Dharma lineages. So those people who actually have faith in the teachings of the Buddha should forget about even doing them, even if they hear about or see such actions, they should flee as far away from them as they can. So this is one thing that he said. Now, another thing that Mikyo Dorje said was, so people say that if the Sakya teachings flourish, they say, oh, this is wonderful, I rejoice in this. But if the Gelugpa teaches, they're sort of like indifferent. It doesn't matter to me if the Gelug teaches spread or not. But to be like that is a perversion of the way great beings made offerings of practice. So when the great beings of the past would make offerings through their practice and meditation, so this doesn't. So doing that does not match the way they practice. Particularly when we think about so actually, when you think about in our Lama lineage, we have the Sakyapas and Gelugpas and Nyingmas in our lineage. So when you think about and so if we are acting like this, it does not become an offering of practicing to the lineages of the lineage of the Lamas. If there is someone if there's a good action of unmistakably giving up misdeeds and practicing virtue for the sake of his higher estates and true excellence, Even if in name it is called non-Buddhist, in actuality, when you're doing it, it is a Buddhist action. If you don't do this good, if you don't do the good actions of practicing, giving up misdeeds and practicing virtue, but you do it the other way around, even if you call it a Buddhist action, it is actually worse than a non-Buddhist. It's not better, certainly. And so for this reason, dividing individuals and Dharma into factions and then helping or harming them, helping your own faction and harming the others, and then still thinking that you're practicing the Dharma is what we call the kind of the four touches according to four touches. And so this is the same as acting according to your own wishes, according to desire and hatred and delusion and so forth. And so it's basically me saying that you're acting out of attachment and aversion. You're doing an unvirtuous action, not a dharma action. And so this is what Mikado said in his own instructions. So when we say in instructions, this means a text that teaches where he teaches his students what they should do and what they should not do. And so in brief, all of the disharmony within the Buddha's teachings, all of the problems, all of the faults come from the attachment to external objects and to our internal mind. It's from our attachment, hatred, and arrogance, and so forth. This is what they arise from. And when Mikyo Dorje understood this, so while he was in Eastern Tibet, and so in Eastern Tibet, there were a lot of people who had faith in the Karmapa, and so his own side became very powerful and wealthy. And so when it came to harming other sentient beings, the misdeeds just naturally occurred. And so he left Eastern Tibet and went to the region of Kongpo. Now, Kongpo, as I mentioned the other day, there were, as I said yesterday, the disputes between the Kaju and the Gelugpa, and Mikyo Dorje resolved this results and brought stability and peace to the kingdom. And it sounded very good in the words, but in actuality, everybody in his ritual started getting very they started to act very hectically, and they did more and more misdeeds. And so there was no other way to prevent this. So he left Kongpo and went to Central Tibet. Now, the reason he went to Central Tibet is that Central Tibet was actually a Gelugpa region. In Central Tibet there were kings, and because there's a king, there were laws, strict laws, since the monastics also had to follow the laws, so they had less opportunity to do all sorts of different things. And so he thought that this was good, and so for that reason he went to Central Tibet. There probably wasn't, at that time, anyone who was inviting him in particular. It's just that Mikyo Dorje himself said that he wanted to go there. And some people said that, so some people said, if no one's inviting us and we go without that, then aren't we going to get weak if we do that? But he didn't listen to that. He went to stay in empty valleys and mountainsides, basically isolated places in Central Tibet. So in brief, if he'd gone to a place where the monastics received a lot, were highly regarded and were thought of very well, then they would have a lot of sensory pleasures. If they had a lot of sensory pleasures, they'd naturally have start to have connections of attachment and aversion. And if they had that, there'd naturally be a lot of disputes. And so in order to prevent that, Mikyo Dorje went to stay in places with people. The local leaders and the people had little regard for the Dharma, and where they had received few offerings and respect. And we went to such regions and stayed there. When there were monks who had pretended to be pure in the precepts about the fetching water and observing the minor precepts of the Vinaya and so forth, and they pretended to be actual monks, even though they didn't actually have the qualities in this, then this might fool the faithful people and make them feel faith, and they would then give many different offerings. Now they don't offer. Now it's because now it's not actually good that they're doing this because they would be pretending, and that's receiving offerings out of that, and so that is actually a wrong livelihood. And because that was an impure livelihood, as generally he made rules that everyone should give up that have had to give up meat and alcohol. And so even those who are unable to actually keep that in themselves, there are even those who made an outward pretense of following the discipline. He didn't allow them to even do the to act like charlatans, pretending to be Dharma practitioners. And so at that time, the people said, "As the Karmapa and his disciples had behaved rudely and do not know how to get along in the world, they should behave like the in the world." There are some good people, there's some bad people. There are all sorts of different people out there. They don't know how to fit into society. They don't know how to make connections with people, and how to placate other people. So they don't know how to do this. So take a look at them. They don't have a lot of influence, and they don't receive a lot of offerings, right? So many people spoke like this. Similarly, the great monasteries with a lot of monasteries and seats, when they were to go from one place, one fault that happened is that as many animals were killed. When a great lama would go, a lot of people in the lama's entourage, and so they went to a place where everyone had faith in them. Then people there would want to think they want to offer them good food, and if they want to. And so if you want to offer them good food, you have to kill some sentient beings, right? And so Mikyo Dorje saw that doing so led to animals being killed and causing the difficulty. And so he was and wherever he went, he would very skillfully get people to stop eating meat. But in the region of Kongpo, because of the way that country, just because of the situation in the country, he was unable to stop people eating meat in the region of Kongpo. And particularly the region of Kongpo and also the region of Changtang. In Changtang, they didn't have a lot of other resources, and so they only lived off of eating meat. And so for that reason, he didn't go very often to Kongpo and Changtang. And one of the reasons he went is because they killed a lot of animals and ate a lot of meat. And so it is said that this is one reason why he did not go to these regions. And likewise, as I mentioned the other day, in the region of central Tibet, the previous Karmapas and Sharmapas, the 7th Karmapa and the 4th Sharmapa, had established the monastery of Tubchen Monastery in Lhasa and Yambacheng Monastery in Yambacheng in the north. And some of the Gelugpa monks suspected that they had founded the monasteries in order to deprive the Gelugpa monks of offerings, and so this caused a lot of disharmony between the Karma Kagyu and the Kagyu and Gelugpa monks. And Mikyo Dorje thought about this, that it's because of the Tubchen Monastery in the Tubchen Monastery in Lhasa. Now, this is later called the Karma Gunchen, so that's the spot, right? And so Mikyo Dorje realized that this is the basis for the deceit. So during his time, and so at that time, the Lord of U was Nedongpa. He's tried to give it back to him for him to take care of it. And he tried to give him back, but Nedongpa wouldn't accept it. And when Nedongpa didn't expect it, so then what Mikyo Dorje did is Mikyo Dorje didn't leave anyone there, even a guard. And we don't even need to mention a Sangha. He didn't leave even a guard there. And so no one was repairing the roof. And so the roof leaked and the house fell into disrepair. There's no one looking after it. And this is while Mika Dorje himself was alive. And so everyone who's very partisan partisan Kaju followers were very unhappy about this, because the seventh Karmapa built a monastery, and Mika Dorje just didn't keep it up, and not only that, it totally disregarded, and it fell into disrepair and was falling down, and there was just a stripe. And we'd think the same thing these days too, right? Still, the partisans would think that, but in the actual situation, Mika Dorje's way of acting here was to so that everyone around him would not have to participate in disputes between members of the Sangha, and so that the Kaju and the Gelugpa, in order to bring everyone to great happiness. Likewise, from the old days until the present, not just in this was just in the past, it's also in the current day. When we talk about giving up vows or breaking vows, well, the main reason for breaking vows or for disputes has been disputes over rank and position and the heights of thrones. And we have disputes over rank and the height of thrones. So in the old days in Tibet, during the time of the Yuan dynasty and the Ming dynasty, the Sakyapas and the Karmapas had a very high status. So the Sakyas, but later from the time of the fifth Dalai Lama, the Karma Kaju, the Kaju teaching distributed. But when but even then, when the Kaju teachings declined, this fifth Dalai Lama did not put the Karmapa at the low place, but he gave him the same rank as the Sakyas. So at that time, the Sakyas and the Karmapas were about the same position, but later the Sakyapas did not have as much as a high regard and high position as they had it earlier during the time of the Mongol or Yuan dynasty. But the respect of the Karmapas continued in the same as before up through the 10th Karmapa. And so everyone from all different, everyone respected him so much that and so this is something that didn't sit very well with the lamas and leaders from monasteries of other lineages. And I think, is it okay? I could do it. And so that's it. I got it prostrated. And so I can't give them make a good seat for them unless they're going to give me a nice thick set of cushions, or I can't prostrate them or can't. The question of a lot of things, whether it's like whether you should stand up for them and prostrate. For some, you sometimes you give the kata, and so it's like you receive a kata from one, give another, and so this is another protocol. And third is, if there are two people of the equal rank, they prostrate to each other, and this is very difficult. It's very annoying, and so there's many difficulties about this. It's fine to go with. It'd be fine to go to see the Mika Dorje, but if I go, then I have to have a good seat, and they have to prostrate me. And so a lot of people would say this, and the people from the encampment would say you can't do that, and so then that created disputes between them. But at that time, in order to establish good relations with others and to resolve disputes, Mika Dorje would, even if other people would not prostrate him or prepare a seat for him, he would still meet with them. And when he met with them, so everyone would say all sorts of different things. And when they said all the different things they said was like, some people would talk about it in a good respect, and some would say bad things about it. The people who spoke about it negatively said, this is terrible. All of the Karmapa's greatness and influence and mystique have all been lost. Mika Dorje has the Karmapas used to be in a position like the sun in the sky, and now it's been brought it down to earth. He's like harmed the teachings. This is terrible. No, but other people spoke about it well said, the Karmapa said, the Karmapa is Avalokiteshvara who's come to benefit beings. Not even if he prostrate, even if the other doesn't prostrate to him or prepare seats for him, when he prostrates to them and makes seats for them, he says this is the way to gain influence over them, and this is the action of a bodhisattva. And so they praise him for it. But the people who praised him and the people who criticized him both did not understand Mikyo Dorje's own intention. Now, Mikyo Dorje's own character is that when someone would come trying to compete with him and try to see that he was greater or better than him, then Mikyo Dorje wouldn't specifically put himself in an especially low position, nor would he try to elevate them and say, you're really wonderful. Even if there were ordinary people who came, even if they didn't show him any sign of respect, he'd still treat them well. And so he'd try to find the balance between falling into either extreme. And the reason for this is that in the past, there had been a great dispute between the Sakya and the Drikung, and the main thing that happened had been the disputes over rank and the size of the throne, and so because of that great dispute over rank and the threat opponents, that developed into large conflicts, and that created a lot of harm for the teachings of the Buddha's teachings. So there are many reasons to prevent that from happening. And so, seeing that, Mikyo Dorje acted in the way that he did. Like also, there is a story about the past lives of Mikyo Dorje, written by Mikyo Dorje himself, and what it says in that is, it's kind of strange actually, but I'm not going to read this word for word, but I'm going to explain the meaning of it. In the past of the previous Karmapas, in the time of the 5th and 6th and the 7th Karmapas, there was a Sakya, the Sakya Goma, the Sakya, there's the Shitot Ladrang. They wouldn't send letters, but for me, Mikyo Dorje, the Sakya Shiton Ladrang sent me a letter. Not only did they that, at the end of that, it said that it had the words Kien Kien. It said very, very respectful words. So they're showing me great respect. When they showed me that respect, I thought to myself, oh, I'm very fortunate. And the reason for that is that because such great beings don't do that for no reason. They have reasons to do that. Since the people up to the Sakya Goma think that because the Sakya Goma is paying respect to me, some people say, "Oh, I must be." They give me a lot of respect because of this. But some people don't like it. They get jealous. And they'd say, "Oh, I'm coming to meet you, but when I come to meet you, you need to prostrate to me. You need to prepare a seat for me." And the reason for that is, so they're speaking to Mikyo Dorje, and the reason they say is my older brother, your previous incarnation prostrated to my older brother. Likewise, I say, they prostrated to my father, or to my mother, or to my wife, or my grandmother, or my sister. Your previous incarnation prostrated to them, right? And so you have to prostrate to me too, they say. And Mikyo Dorje, now I don't know who it was who's saying that. I'm not sure who it is, but there was someone who came and saying this. When that person came, then what Mikyo Dorje said, "No, you have no reason to say that," he said. Because who are you saying are my previous lives? You're talking about my previous lives, right? If you're talking about the previous Karmapas, if you're speaking about that, then it's possible that they could do various different types of actions to tame sentient beings. It's possible they could prostrate to someone, but in general, the Karmapas are Buddhas, it wouldn't be right for them to prostrate to ordinary sentient beings, because if a Buddha prostrates to a sentient beings, and then it mixes up the interdependence. It doesn't match with the sequence of cause and effect. Now, if you're talking about my own Mikyo Dorje as an ordinary sentient being, my own previous sentient being, then I don't know. Then I don't know. Because I don't remember prostrating to it in a previous life and you probably don't remember it either. And even if you remembered it from beginning of some time, I've prostrated to you and you've prostrated to me. And so forget about prostrating. And there's no reason why you have to prostrate to just me in particular. So for that reason, in a previous lifetime, you have probably prostrated to the old guard dog who's sitting by the gate to my door. And so for that reason, so first you go and prostrate to my old guard dog, and then come back in and I'll prostrate to you, and then I can make then I can give you a nice seat, and I can give you a letter. I'll do whatever you want then. And so that's what he's saying. So he's saying this is saying it as he's saying this is a joke. And so he told this is a joke to other people. So those are jokes. Now, when you go to the serious bit, and we talk about the actual facts, then what Mikyo Dorje said is the past great abbot told us that the teachings would appear to have disagreements over the ways they paid respect to each other through seats or prostrations or so forth. So it seemed that there would be these disagreements or disputes or fights between them on an external level. For example, there was a Taglen Saja Yajun, who was a very famous Lama. I think he's probably the one who founded the Martang Monastery. I'm not certain exactly, but he was a very important Lama of the Taklon Kagyu tradition. So Taglen Saja Yajun, when Karma Pakshe went to see Taklon Saja Yajun, Taklon Saja Yajun was staying in a cave, and at the gate to the cave, he didn't put down a cushion for Karma Pakshe. He just put aside him, had him sit right there. And at that point, Mikyo Dorje got a little offended, and what he did is he turned around, put sat with his back to him. So Mikyo Dorje and turned his back on the cave and sat there like that. So that was one situation that happened. And also there was a Tela monastery, the Chenga Drapa Yeshe. When Drupta Ojimpa came to visit him, he didn't give him a good seat. When he didn't do that, then Drupta Orjin got a little bit offended. And as he was prostrating, he saw that there wasn't a good seat, and he stopped prostrating and started quarreling with him. So the past and current great beings will do various different things in order to sort of examine the levels of different sentient beings. And so Mikyo Dorje said, I prostrate and go for refuge to those great beings with great respect. The great beings of the past have had these disputes in the past, and so of course we are going to too. And so for that reason, so we cannot say that there are many disputes in the past between scholars and practitioners and masters over seats and offenses, but we can't and so forth. And we can't say that necessarily all offenses. But the disputes that arise solely from the power of detachment and so forth are the basis of great wisdoms, as we can see very clearly in the estate. Now, there's also quite a bit about this in the Mountain Dharma by Karma Chakme. And we talk about how do we think about positions and the height of thrones and so forth in Tibet. The reason it came about was that in Tibet, there are the Mongol kings and the Chinese kings, when they would invite the emperors would invite the Tibetan lamas, they'd give them high titles, give them a high position, and would give them different colored cushions and different colored seals and stamps. And for that's how they got that sort of status. Before that, there was no such there were no such privileges and status. For example, if you think about Marpa and Milarepa and Gampopa, Dusum Kempa, Dukung Chopa, Taklon Tampa, and others, did they have any privileges and status? They didn't at all. And so Drogon Palmo Drukma, so he had like 5,000. He had 5,000 very well-known, famous students, and who's giving teachings to them? Drogon Palmo Drukma had only a simple, had a small seat of had a skin seat. It was a very thin skin seat that he's sitting at, or a hide, an animal hide seat. Now in our Vinaya, there was no seniority in terms of place, of position, and so forth. But in the Vinaya, it's all in terms of seniority of taking the precepts. Now, in the Vajrayana, there's seniority in terms of realization, but there's no other situation position. In the places where the great monasteries in central Tibet, there's so many monks that they have a tradition of doing what they call the fast. And they said that the way that this works is that everyone would stand outside of the gates with the gates closed, and then they would open the gates and everyone would rush in, and whoever got to the front got to sit there. So I think this is actually like has probably a seed, and there's a seeds of this in the Vinaya, but other than that, there is no reason. It's no tradition of doing this. But later, there were the positions of giving people the different ranks, people of different ranks in the in different positions in the ranks. And so this is there was a student of Chiba Sungyedu, and so there are 8 major students of this, and one of these was Tsangapa Tsundru. Tsangapa Tsundru was a very learned master. So one time, he went to a great monastic college, and when he was there, there were great disputes over the ranks, and so he didn't have any place to sit, so he didn't go any place to get. He had to sit back with the servants, and so he was a little bit. So he's got a little offended. They're thinking, now I'm such a great scholar, and they're criticizing me. So the next morning, what he did then is, before he did that, before he got up, what he got a donkey. So he took a donkey, and he put the 3 dharma robes on it, and he brought it into the temple, and put it at the head, and tied it to the pillar at the front of at the head of the ranks. And so everyone came in the next morning. They think, what's happening? Why is there a donkey there? And so then when someone was saying, what is that? And what Tsangapa said is, this has a very nice, this has such a good, such has a nice voice. And wears such nice robes, so I put it at the front of the hang. You see, like donkeys are very nice when they take it. So it's something to saying that, because at the umze is at the front of the ranks. It doesn't have a lot of education, has nice clothes, but they sit up at the front of that. So if you get to sit at the front of the rows because you have a nice voice and you have good clothes, then you can put that donkey at the front of at the head of the rows, right? And so there are a lot of events similar to this one. And so the position in the ranks and positions and privileges happened after the connections with the Mongol and the Chinese emperors. But before then, there was no question of privilege or rank. So in brief, Mikhail Dorje in order to tried in many different ways to prevent and to stop the great stream of misdeeds within himself. And he also did what he could to sever that stream of misdeeds within others as well. And whether someone who was a monastic who'd gone forth or in the teachings or lay people who had not, he he advised them on how to give up misdeeds and practice virtue, and he actually brought them to act virtuously. So there are many infinite numbers of such situations. As is said in the Prajnaparamita Sutras, what it says is, a great irreversible bodhisattva abandons the 10 non-virtues themselves, gets others to abandon them, and declares the excellence of abandoning them, and acts according to that, accordingly. So the great irreversible bodhisattvas abandon the 10 virtues unto themselves. They get others to do it. They praise those who have abandoned them and encourage others to act in the same way. So Mikyo Dorje, it's not necessarily to say anything else. When many people saw Mikyo Dorje or heard him teach, there are a lot of people who promised to give up killing and to give up stealing, to give up giving up on reneging on their oaths, or to not be deceitful in business, or to use their wife to save lives, to free prisoners from prisons, to save the lives of sentient beings, of animals, to get people to promise to not cause harm to temples or representations of the Buddhist speech and mind. You got people to abide by the discipline of vows, of the fasting vows, to make vows to become vegetarian. And also there are infinite people who, and to recite the 100 million Mani mantras. So there are infinite people who made these to do this. And so in general, this is primarily during the Black Crown ceremony that people made these promises. So in the short term, he blocked by encouraging the practice of virtue. In the short term, he blocked the way of the ways for them to be rebirthed in the lower realm and opened the gate to the higher realms, ultimately bringing them to Buddhahood. And so he showed us a good example of a great example of a great being. And if we can believe that and think of it as true, then there's great benefits to us. Because sometimes we believe it, but we don't really believe it. And we keep all these stories about people, about how one person harmed another, and so we kept everything about the older students keep these factional ideas in their minds. They tell them to the younger monastics, and the younger monastics keep it up, and so it's keep going from generation after generation. So, but very few people talk about how people do the good deeds of giving up misdeeds and practicing virtue. But they're always talking about the actions out of attention and aversion. They talk about the heights of thrones, the positions and stuff. They say that they talk about how in the past it was like this and now we're not then. So they often sometimes even crying as they talk about this. But when you talk about the misdeeds, you don't really ever see anyone who's crying over the great person over a great being who is giving up misdeeds and practicing virtue. They say, "Oh, it's important, it's great," but they don't really have feeling about it. And so for that, you need to know what are the real example of what is the real liberation of a great being, and that is what we need to look at. So being factional, trying to get high ranks and positions, and 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 criticizing great beings. These are things that we should consider as not being good, as not being authoritative, and so we should avoid these as much as we can. So that is enough for right now. We will take the break.